Good
Uh,
morning, Patrick.
it is a beautiful day out today, but this is a time of year in which workforce boards like Philadelphia Works. So I'm the president and CEO of Philadelphia Works. Love being together with my colleagues in Bucks County. Billy Barnes, who is the executive director of many things in Bucks County. I will pass it over to her in a few minutes. But the work that we do is really relying on the data that we can have access to. And I have to tell you, you're going to hear from an expert today, a brilliant man that really helps to make our lives much easier and really gives us the sort of insight that we need to make the proper investments. If there's anything that's critical in the work we do as workforce boards, is really investing in high quality services. So hopes that people can get high quality jobs. So today you're going to get a fantastic presentation. We're really excited to have Christopher Laney with us. I don't want to say a whole lot more because I have to have something for Billy to do, right, Billy? So I just want to pass it off to my friend and colleague. Once again, we'd love to have you listen to the presentation. Billy will then kind of give you direction on what else we need to do as far as questions and things like that. So once again, welcome to Wednesday. This is our WED Talks as a region, and we're really excited to have Christopher talk to us today. Billy, hand it off to
Well,
you, my
good
friend.
morning. Good morning, Pat Clancy, and thanks for that wonderful introduction. And good morning, everyone. Welcome, everyone else. The labor market is constantly evolving due to technological advancements, economic shifts, and demographic changes. Understanding current and emerging labor market trends is essential for employees, employers, and policymakers alike. It helps us anticipate changes, mitigate risk, and seize new opportunities. How can this information also be used to build a future ready workforce? Well, today's WEDTalk expert is here to explain how. As Vice President of Government Affairs and Partnerships at Lightcast, Dr. Christopher Laney serves workforce organizations and leaders across the country on a variety of workforce related projects. He also influences and monitors state and federal policy to see where Lightcast can partner with governments to further a data driven approach to workforce development. As a labor economist, he researches and analyzes economic trends and looks for opportunities to build a more equitable labor market that helps everyone find upward economic mobility. Please help me welcome Dr. Christopher Laney. Chris?
Well, good morning. Thank you guys for that warm welcome. I'm excited to join you guys virtually. I was in Pennsylvania last week. I was in Allegheny County and then flew over to Philadelphia for the week. And I told a few people when I was there last week in 2020, end of 2021, I had never been to Pennsylvania, and I've been there 7 times in 3 years, or 2.5 years. So there's a lot of great activity happening in the state, and so we're thankful to be part of it. So let me go ahead and we're going to get started here. All right. One of the things that I'm excited about sharing is I love talking about trends. And the reason for that is because trends are kind of twofold. One, it's happening right now. These are not trends that we are monitoring in the sense that it could happen in 20 years. These are things that we are living right now. And I split it up into two categories. We have current trends and we have emerging trends. The emerging trends are also things we're experiencing right now. And in terms of those longevity, that's it's still seen to be seen. So I am excited to jump into them. We really have two things on the agenda today. We're going to talk about challenges, and we're going to talk about potential solutions at a very high level and how you can approach workforce development in your region as you are going through these very difficult challenges that we're experiencing. For those of you that have either heard me talk or have been part of any of the Lightcast research that we've put out, a lot of this is on the basis of research that we did called the demographic drought in 2021, 2022, and then in 2023, we did a global demographic drought. And then I'm excited to say this year, we are bringing it back again to once again look at those trends and see all the predictions that we have been looking at over the last couple of years, whether or not they are playing out in the labor market. And so some of that research you probably have seen, and then there's some other areas that I just want to bring to your attention that we are being very cautious and considerate about. These are our 10 trends. So it's kind of the preview. Our 5 current trends I'm going to jump into, and then our 5 emerging trends that we continuously see in the labor economy today. So let's get started. For those of you that have seen this research, we have talked extensively about population challenges. And so we have been living under the birth replacement rate since the mid-1970s. And what does this mean for us? A couple of things. One, we know we're not going to replace the people that we are losing. So we used a terminology or a word that we coined called the sansdemic, meaning without people. How do we operate in an economy where we don't have enough people to do those jobs? And it's something that we have to consider. One of the things that we used to mention, 5, 10 years ago, is how automation and AI was going to replace all these jobs, and we're going to have all these displaced workers. We believe that we're going to need automation and we're going to need people to keep up with production. So yes, there could be individuals out there that need to be reskilled, but for the most part, there will always be opportunities for people to take advantage of if they're willing to get the skills. This is not a United States problem. This is a worldwide issue. And the reason why this is really important for us here in the United States is we have generally benefited from immigration, which I'm going to talk about in a few moments. But when you have a worldwide crisis or challenge like the birth replacement rate being under, countries are starting to realize that their greatest commodity are people. And so they have to be able to keep their people within their region, within their regions, so that they can also participate in the labor market. I want to point just really quickly to a country like Mexico, where we do benefit from getting a lot of net migration. Even Mexico now is below that birth replacement rate, and they are experiencing one of the lowest unemployment rates and one of the highest level of wages than they've seen in generations. The challenge in Mexico has really been just the crime. If they get crime under control, a lot of individuals may be choosing to stay within their own country and not necessarily migrating to other areas. 3 areas that we know is going to shape the future of our global labor supply. One is that aging population, which I kind of got into already. 2, as I mentioned, immigration plays a big role into our labor market. And as immigration starts to fall and countries really start to adapt to keeping their people, this is really going to have an effect, especially on those developing countries that's relied on immigration, like the United States. And then we right now are experiencing higher workforce labor force participation, and that will help us for a few years. But over the next 10 years, we're going to see labor force participation start to dwindle down because we don't have enough young people to replace people in those jobs. This here is looking at working age population. And so this is looking at that working age population between 2000 and 2020. And then now we're looking at trends out to 2040. And you can see here the working age population in the United States, while we've done pretty well over the last 20 years, we are going to slow at a dramatic rate. And so we're going to see less and less individuals become of age, which is 25 years of age, in that working age population group. But you can see across all regions globally, it's shrinking. So again, going back to those countries, they're going to have to rely on keeping their own population locally if they're going to be able to keep up with the demand of the labor market. The next area is labor force participation. For those of you that are less familiar with labor force participation, I just want to touch on it very quickly. Labor force participation are those that have the ability to work, but are choosing not to work, and they're also not collecting unemployment. So for many communities, when we look at the health of a community, we always look at typically unemployment. We go, well, we have low unemployment here. We're doing really well. If there's one thing that we learned during the pandemic, we've learned a lot of things, but one thing when it comes to the labor market is that we did have a lot of individuals that were choosing not to enter the labor market, and they were also not collecting unemployment. And we saw those percentages drop off pretty dramatically through the pandemic. This here is a representation of labor force participation in the United States. You can see here the dramatic drop that happened in April of 2020. To this day, we have not recovered that percentage that we once had before the pandemic, really starting to create a new norm, a new baseline for labor force participation within the United States. Now, out of those that dropped out of the labor force during the pandemic, 5 million of them were individuals that dropped out. 80% of those individuals accounted for 55 plus individuals. And out of those 5 million, 3 million said, I'm out. I'm not coming back to the labor force, which really drove some of the challenges and shortages that we're still experiencing today. Among that 55 plus, it is not recovering because they're retired. A lot of those individuals chose to leave the labor market and they chose not to come back. This is all the way through 2023 at the end of the year. And we saw that those retirement rates were just not calming down. We assumed that when inflation started to occur in 2022, that we would see kind of those individuals that said, I did retire early, but things are just getting really expensive. So we really need to return back to the labor force. That did not occur. A lot of those individuals really did stay out of the labor force and chose not to return. There are fewer people collecting unemployment now than in 1970 when the labor force was 102% smaller. I like those little tidbits. We'll share out the deck for those that are attending, so you have an opportunity to use those same little tidbits when you're talking to your community leaders. The next portion I want to talk about is foreign-born and immigration. I've talked a little bit about the challenges in regards to net migration, birth replacement rates in the country and other countries as well. Foreign-born and immigration, we rely so dramatically on here in the United States. Over the course of the last a couple of years, in 2021 and 2022, we talked about falling immigration. And we specifically talked about the fact that we were struggling in our labor market and we were losing people, and we had a lot less immigrants coming into the United States. And we saw that. A couple of reasons for that is during the pandemic, people just were not moving from country to country. And two, we had a lot less student visas for students choosing to come into the United States during that period, and in which case then they were also not working. Well, towards the end of 2022, going into 23, we saw massive spikes of immigrants coming into the United States. And we saw articles of media companies saying we had so many immigrants coming to the United States. The data didn't show that. That didn't make sense to us. So our research team went back and realized that we were only documenting legal entrances into the United States, and we were not looking at non-legal or pending who are already in the United States. You can see here the massive growth of either non-legal or pending individuals that were coming into the United States during that period of time. We had 2.4 million individuals who were non-legal and pending during the course of the last few years, of which we believe more than half of those individuals are likely stayers here in the United States. Now, I'm not going to jump into the politics or anything along those lines. I just share the data alone. And the one thing is true is immigration plays a large role in our labor market. Nearly 70% of those that are non-legal or pending in the United States are working within our labor market right now. Since the beginning of 2022, the U.S. has added 2.5 million immigrants to our labor pool. In all reality, immigrants are really the only driver to upward success when it came to adding to the labor force participation and adding people into the labor market. We believe now that about 1 in 5 individuals in the United States that are working are immigrants that have come to here to the United States. Most of the growth, as I mentioned before, over the past 20 months have come from immigrants. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the challenges that's going to shape our labor pool is immigration. And as countries rely less on immigrants coming to their regions, it's really going to create an additional labor squeeze or squeeze in the labor market. You can see here, these are average net migration rates, similar to that other chart. This is looking at 2000 to 2020, and then looking at projections out through 2040. First and foremost, maybe you didn't know this, I certainly didn't, that we haven't even been the top in terms of net migration in the last 20 years. The Australia, New Zealand region, the APAC region, has really been the #1 region in the world who has benefited from net migration of individuals moving to that region. And as we look through 2040, yes, they're going to slow down dramatically, just like us. But again, North America will not be able to rely fully on immigrants to be able to fill the roles that we need here in the United States. Now you can see there are already many regions within the country that have negative net migration. They have had that for 20 years, and they will project to have that over the next 20 years, which is going to create massive challenges within those regions. This is a way for us to kind of do our own SWOT analysis on what is happening in the labor market in terms of migration and skills. So the way I'm looking at this here is in that top left-hand corner where you see West Europe, East Asia, and just the line where South Europe is. These are individuals, these are regions that have a declining working age population, so 25 to 64. They also have some gaps when it comes to skills and being tech ready and having innovative skills to be able to keep their economy going. So in this sense, it's if you train these individuals, that could help your economy, but you also have a declining working age population. In the bottom left-hand corner, I apologize, in the top left-hand corner there, they do have a skilled workforce. In the bottom left-hand corner, they have a declining working age population as well as skill tech gaps within those regions. So East Europe and South Europe specifically, you have a declining working age population. You also have some skill deficiencies. In the top right-hand corner where North America is still in that area, just barely, Europe as well as Australia and New Zealand or the APAC region, they have a growing working age population, which right now we do have a growing age population. We believe that that's going to really start to decline over the next 5 to 10 years. But we also have a workforce that is skilled. They have skills that are tech ready and innovative and really can keep up with production within our labor economy. In the bottom right-hand corner, these are regions that have a growing working age population, but they have skill deficiencies. And here's the benefit, or what our regions like ourselves or even Australia and New Zealand are really considering is that how do we go within those regions that are in the bottom right-hand corner? How do we skill them and then use them as remote employees, which is definitely very common right now. But as some of those regions start to fall off from their working age population, or individuals are choosing to migrate out of those areas, they are also going to struggle with just keeping their own economies afloat and their own labor force participation up. The next area I want to talk about is skills alignment. Before I get into there, first and foremost, as we look at job openings month to month, we still have record amount of job openings. 8.5 million job openings here in the United States right now. This is still above the record of 7 million that was the pre-pandemic. And so there's still a lot of opportunity out there. However, when we start to dive into the data, some of the results might look a little differently depending on the type of jobs that you're looking for. I've talked about this extensively, but the United States is highly educated. Right now, when we think about those that are collecting unemployment right now, which is about just under 5 million individuals, it's pretty much split between those that don't have a college education and those that do have a college education. However, the majority of jobs that are open here in the United States right now do not require a college degree. So even in a perfect world, if we took every single person collecting unemployment to try to fill these 8 million plus jobs, we still have a massive shortage that we cannot fill. This here is looking at the United States by education level. You can see here those that have less than a high school diploma, about 9 million, versus those with a bachelor's degree or higher, which is just over 65 million. The reason why this is important to us as we're looking at the diversity of our labor market and the type of roles that we need to fill, a couple of things come to mind. One, a lot of the roles that we do need to fill are in those lower skilled quadrant, as well as when we look at labor force participation rate for those with less than a high school diploma is under 50%, versus those that have at least a bachelor's degree is above 73%. This is really important for us to understand because a lot of the jobs that we need to fill right now are those lower skilled jobs, yet half of that population that might be suitable for those jobs are choosing not to work or out of the labor force. Now, we don't make any assumptions to the why, but a couple of things that do come to mind. If you are in some of those lower skilled jobs where you're not earning as much money as you potentially can, you may have a parent that's choosing to stay home because childcare costs, or maybe you have an elderly parent that you're taking care of. There's a variety of reasons why someone in that lower earning quadrant might be choosing not to work, but it is something that we are very sensitive to. And certainly we want to get these individuals skilled so they can get into higher wage opportunities. Now, if we look at the job postings over the course of from month to month, and this is not much different. The February of 2024, it actually should be April of 2024 because I did update these job postings before today's presentation. The majority of these job postings do not require a formal education outside of high school. Yes, registered nurses, we know that's a massive demand across the entire country. That's not going away. Software developers, another area I would argue that it requires skills, maybe not a degree. That's why I have it in green, because you can learn the skills and certifications to be a great software developer without a formal bachelor's degree or higher. But the majority of these other jobs are in that lower skilled area that either you can develop your career in or you can jump right into those jobs right now. A quarter of all job postings in the United States this year came from only 3 industries: healthcare, food services, and retail and hospitality. And even when you look within healthcare, you have a diversity really focused around CNAs, medical assistants, home health aides. A good portion came from that area. And then you also have registered nurses and LPNs. What's fascinating here, and I've talked a lot about working age population, and I've mentioned we are growing for in the short term, that are 25 years and older, we have a segment of people coming into that age cohort. Now, when we look at those that are 25 years plus that are coming into the labor force, there's about 2.7 million individuals over the last couple of years who have come to age of 25 years or older. Of that 2.7 million, 69,000 had a high school diploma. We've lost a net 1.2 million individuals who had an associate's degree or similar, but we've added 4.5 million individuals who have a bachelor's degree or higher that have become of age. So you have a large segment of our population that's joining the labor force, but they are also highly educated. They're coming in with degrees, and their expectations are, I'm going to get a job that matches my degree specifically. And so it continues to ask the question for us is, who's going to do the work? Who's going to do the work specifically that keeps our economy running in those either lower skilled opportunities or in those specifically certification driven occupations? The next area I want to talk about for a couple of minutes is opioids and alcohol abuse. Right here, we're looking at drug overdose deaths since 2019. We knew during the pandemic that alcohol abuse as well as opioid abuse really increased quite significantly. I'm excited to say it's not been updated yet. Just a couple of weeks ago, the 2023 numbers came out. It was a bit lower than 21 and 22, still pretty high. I think it was pretty close to the 2020 numbers. But this is something that's really, really important for us to recognize, that there are individuals that are out of the labor market because of drug and opioid usage. When we think about the opioid epidemic here, this is the spike that we're seeing in narcotics, psychostimulants, and alcohol. You can see in all instances that at the beginning of 2020, first of all, there was already a bell curve going up over the last decade, but it really spiked during the pandemic. And while we've seen in instances where it's teetered off a little bit, for the most part, we're still at pretty record highs. Now, when we think about labor force participation and we think about those that are affected by opioids and alcohol abuse, we know that if you have some sort of substance disorder, that you are 13% lower chances of being in the labor force. And this is a dramatic, you think about having almost 2 in 10 people that, or a little bit more than 2 in 10 people that are out of the labor force because of alcohol and opioid related challenges. Lightcast believes that we have 2.7 million prime age individuals not participating in the labor market today due to substance abuse. So I want to jump into those emerging trends that we have been watching more closely over the last 12 months or so. And I want to start with elderly care. I've talked a little bit in detail about, obviously, we have a lot of individuals retiring. That 55 plus cohort left the labor force. But what was also discouraging that we've seen over the last year or two is that elderly care kept coming up as a reason why individuals are not in the labor market. We often would talk about childcare and how individuals are not are staying home to take care of young children. And now we started to hear, well, I'm working part-time, or I'm staying home to work to take care of my own parent. In the United States, our age dependency rate is going to continuously increase. We have benefited from having essentially a lower working age generation. But now we are starting to see that US dependency rate really increase quite significantly, which this has been the case in Europe for many years. And they've had a grapple with a healthcare system where they don't have enough people to be able to take care of the older individuals within Europe by 2034, but now we actually are predicting it's a little bit earlier. Older adults will outnumber children for the very first time in the United States history. Another key area that is concerning for us is over the last decade, we've essentially not had any net gains in terms of opening up nursing homes in the United States. We've been closing nursing homes and not opening up new nursing homes essentially across the entire country. And the primary reason for that is staff. A lot of these nursing homes cannot find the staff to be able to manage the nursing homes. And so if you think about the demand for home health aides, but also for CNAs and medical assistants and those areas specifically, these are the occupations that are traditionally driving the the workforce within nursing homes. So if we have a dependency rate that's increasing, we have a growing age demographic within the United States, and we also don't have the nursing homes to help take care of people, then of course, then they're probably going to end up at homes where people are going to have to help take care of them. This is going to really unravel not only what is happening in terms of taking care of our elderly, but also it's going to continue to increase the demand for remote work. I can't go to a conference or have a talk with almost anybody these days without AI coming into the mix. Artificial intelligence continues to be a major driver in the conversation around the labor market. I started the conversation today by sharing that one of the challenges that one of the things that we used to say is AI and automation will replace jobs here in the United States, and we're going to displace a lot of individuals. But we're saying now we need AI, we need automation to keep up with production because we just don't have enough people. The concern that we have right now is that when we look at the top occupations that are going to be affected by AI specifically, the majority of those jobs have a larger percentage and population of women working in those jobs right now. Our concern right now is that if these are the largest occupation clusters that are going to be affected by AI, are we going to then create an equitable scenario among genders within the United States where we now have to have a lot of, we have more women that are going to need to be reskilled into new opportunities. So you can see here at looking at those percentages, 79% of these total jobs are held by women versus 58% men. And so it's something that we are diving in deeper and we are taking into consideration. We're doing a study right now for a board in Maryland where we're diving into this a little bit deeper to better understand what to expect in the future. The World Economic Forum in 2020 said that they predicted that 85 million jobs would be eliminated by 2025, which happens to be in about 6 months. But we would add 97 million new jobs because of AI and automation. Again, AI and automation isn't coming to take your jobs. It's replacing jobs and creating new opportunities, new skilling opportunities for the labor market. Now, when we look at the demand for artificial intelligence, when we look at generative AI, job postings is increasing quite significantly. This is looking at Lightcast data through April, and we are seeing the demand across all industries for generative AI. Now, I mentioned last week I was in Pennsylvania. I was doing a presentation in Southwest PA. And when we looked at generative AI job postings within the healthcare industry, it has also grown quite significantly. So this is across all industries that we're seeing this skill, this need within jobs that are, some of them are entry-level jobs and some of them are more higher level professional jobs. Now you can think, well, maybe they just want them to have some familiarity with using a tool like ChatGPT. That could be the case. But in any way, all these industries are coming and understanding and trying to figure out where does AI play within their industry. The next area I wanted to touch on for a couple minutes is what I'm calling a tale of two economies. Some of the media has been calling this a white collar recession. What do we mean by this? Well, I said earlier that a quarter of all job postings in the United States have only come from three industries: healthcare, food service, and retail. And the majority of those jobs have been lower skilled jobs. This is research that was done by Business Insider looking at the bottom third of earners versus the top third of earners. Essentially, if you're making over $80,000 a year, you're in that top quadrant of earners. You can see here that the bottom third of earners are actually navigating the labor market very differently than the bottom third or the top third of earners. And we started to hear this qualitatively, where we're creating new jobs every month. We get the jobs report. Just last week, we announced another 250,000 jobs were created in the United States economy. But a lot of those job creation is really coming from those lower skilled within those same three industries that our job postings are represented. So if you are working with a job seeker and they're in that lower skilled quadrant, they probably can find a job right now. And the earnings on that job is actually relatively good. In fact, when we think about the industries that have actually kept up with inflation, hospitality and the retail and the food service business is the industries that have kept up with inflation. Now, I would argue those wages were already pretty low. So increasing those wages by 10% isn't a massive jump, but it is a huge jump for those that were making 10% less. And so you can find a job within those sectors where you can earn pretty good money. But we were hearing from those top third of earners where they were like, I cannot find a job. Maybe they got laid off. Maybe they were looking for a new opportunity. But if you were making above 80,000, it's much more difficult to find those opportunities right now in the labor market. So there really is a variance that's happening within the labor market. Now, this is more qualitatively, and I obviously don't have data there in your state, but I was talking to a state yesterday, and they have seen just an uptick in the last month of war notices, which for those of you that are not familiar with war notices, it's businesses that are planning to do layoffs. And so there is still stuff that's happening in the economy that no economist is predicting a recession. Our economy is moving and booming right now. But it just is not the same for everyone. And I think that's important to recognize. For the unemployment, it takes about twice as long to get a job as it did in 2008. A job search in 2008, there was a recession going on, by the way, and so it was hard to find a job. A job search that used to take 10 weeks at a similar unemployment rate now takes 20. So if you are a career coach or you're working with job seekers on a regular basis and you are just struggling to help your individual, your participant find an opportunity and it's taking longer, you're not alone. This is a challenge across the United States. I won't touch too much on this. This is not really affecting the labor market more than it's something that we should be aware of. And that is that the investments right now in our economy has really been focused into some specific sectors. You think about all the money that's really been driving economic development over the course of the last couple of years, and it's been around cybersecurity. It's been around the EV market. It's about semiconductors and the CHIPS Act. And so this is something to pay attention to. The reason why I bring this up is because we as workforce development professionals, as we are serving our communities, our industries, and there is a lot of talk around these specific investments that are coming from the feds. We also don't want to forget that there are incredible industries that continue to keep our economy running. So we still have massive shortages in the hotel industry, in the healthcare, cybersecurity, manufacturing. We have these industries that have been part of our sector strategies for many years, and we certainly don't want to give up on these specific sectors. These are what drive our economy. So as we do take advantage of potentially having these emerging industries come into our communities, we don't want to sidetrack from those industries that keep our communities running. Now in Pennsylvania, Lightcast right now is working on a study with Penn State around semiconductors. Really fascinating data to look at skill shortages, and availability in terms of bringing chip manufacturers into PA. And so there's some really encouraging stuff in terms of that those emerging industries happening within the state. But we don't want to lose focus on these other important industries. The last area I want to touch on is the mental health crisis, the mental health challenges. When we think about the labor force and we think about the generation that's coming into the labor force, it is important to understand where we stand when it comes to mental health. This here is research that was done by Mental Health America. 21% of adults are experiencing some sort of mental illness. 16% of youth report suffering from a depressive episode in the last year. And 55% of adults with a mental illness go without any kind of treatment. Now, in the top right-hand, or that right-hand corner, this is looking at access to care. And the states that are investing the most amount of money to ensure that their working age population has access to mental health care specifically. Pennsylvania is number 2. So that's really, really encouraging in terms of investments to help your population specifically adapt or get the help that they need when it comes to mental health. This is my most depressing slide of the day. So out of everything we've seen today, I know I brought a lot of good news. And so this is very depressing. So this here is looking at depressive symptoms for United States 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. Almost 50% have said, I can't do anything right now. Almost 49% says, I do not enjoy life. And just above 44% say, my life is not useful. So we have a generation right now that is getting to age that is going to be entering the labor force, or they're going to have to try to persist through higher education or post-secondary, which will be difficult in itself. But let's say they do make it through that, and now they are entering the labor force. What kind of effects is this going to have on our labor force in terms of the businesses, the employers, their role in ensuring that they can help these individuals cope with entering the labor force? It comes back to the whole person. We are not just dealing with the worker. This person is a whole person, and recognizing that when there is challenges within the workforce, it's also being sensitive to that. Now, I'm not recommending that there's a pass on actually doing the work within a job or an occupation. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm simply saying that we have a generation that is really going through some stuff. And we could argue the various reasons. It could be social media, it could be whatever it is, but these are real challenges that could affect our labor force. I know I've seen memes, I've seen things out there that is young people that are like, I can't come in today because of X, and it's kind of a joke. But we do believe that there is going to be a labor force that are going to put their mental health challenges ahead of working, and that's going to have an effect on production within the labor market. So that's a lot of information, a lot of things that obviously we're looking at that is a challenge, and it's causing all these different trends are causing kind of what is happening in terms of labor shortages within the labor market. So what can we do about it at a high level? I believe that it's your community, which means that you know what's best for your community. So I'm just giving you kind of at that high level, maybe some structure to start thinking about. One is having a pulse on those emerging sectors. We know that there's been investments in things like tech hubs and other areas in your region. And so we want to ensure that maybe those emerging sectors can help in terms of the declining industries that might be in your region, but also having a pulse on those emerging sectors, understanding the skills related to those emerging sectors. And in addition, do not discount or take the foot off the gas in terms of helping those industries that have been in your community and have been around for a while. Look ahead to the occupations and skills that are being disrupted by technological changes. I mentioned when we talk about AI, understanding the occupations that are most likely to be affected and ensuring that we start to look at people within those communities that are in those roles so that we can start to train them towards emerging occupations that are a bit more, I don't want to use the word like recession proof or technology proof, because I think all occupations can be affected at some point, but just ensuring that they have an array of skills that they can navigate the labor market in a really positive way. Knowing how your talent pipeline will be impacted by demographic and market trends. What do I mean by that? Again, talking about the decline in population growth. if you're in a region where not only you are seeing population growth, but you also don't benefit from net migration of people moving within domestically, that's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a problem. And so there are a lot of communities that see that no one's moving there. So they have a declining net migration or minimal migration, but they also have a declining population. So if you're creating jobs and you're creating industry, but you don't have enough people now, and you're going to have declining population, that's a real concern. And then staying informed about today's labor market, obviously, because of the great leaders there and NPA putting on webinars like this today, hopefully helps you stay, atop of these trends and start to rethink how you're approaching the work that you're doing within your community. How do you build a future-ready community? Again, address your current and future talent demands, looking at those emerging trends and skills, identifying skills adjacent careers. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes we think about career pathways. We think about how people ladder within the same industry. So I'm going to become a CNA. I'm going to become an LPN. I'm going to become an RN. That actually does not occur in the labor market as much as people might think that happens. So making sure that people are collecting skills along their career pathway and developing skills-based pathways that jump industries, really important. Continue to collaborate, communicate with your partners on labor market insights, especially your employers within your regions. Identify businesses that are poised for growth. This is something that Lightcast has spent a little bit more time in more recently. Last year, we acquired a company called Gazelle, which is an AI tool focused on looking at businesses that are growing within a region. So we have an AI score, growth score, where we can determine whether a company is underperforming or overperforming. And we want to be involved in those businesses to see how we can certainly help. Aligned education and workforce leaders around skills and credentials. What we often talk about is a skills-based economy. Easier said than done, but ensuring that we understand this, as workforce professionals, the skills of the future, understand the demand of skills, what skills are in demand based on the occupation or the industry, and ensuring our education partners know what that looks like. And then help businesses find, recruit, and retain region's alumni. Oftentimes we go into a community to do a study and we're trying to understand why people are leaving the region after they graduate. What we're finding is more and more institutions have really good talent within your institutions, and it's the alumni that's leaving. Now, I could argue if you just came to, I'll use the example, I just came to Penn State because I'm going to learn and then I'm going back to my home community. That may be the case, but that's not for everyone. Oftentimes that people will graduate from those institutions and then they just want a job wherever. So they're looking for the best opportunity. So we need to ensure those best opportunities are within our local region. So I'm going to stop there, and I think we have a few minutes for some questions, if anybody might have any. We can either have people jump in, or if they had anything they want to write in chat, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, or maybe I answered them all in the presentation. All right. With that said, I'll pass it back off to the great team that put together today's web talk.
Thanks so much, Dr. Laney. This was a fantastic presentation. So much great data across industries and looking to the future, and really putting together solutions for folks who are looking for ways to be more constructive and in their staffing needs. So thank you so much for all of that. On behalf of Bucks County and all of our regional partners, I also want to thank everyone who joined today's webinar. As Dr. Laney mentioned, the slide deck will be available and we can get that over to folks who attended today. And also there will be a recording of today's presentation for anyone who wants to rewatch, or if folks who have missed it, will be available on PA Career Link Bucks County's YouTube channel. Thanks so much to all and have a great day.